So imagine this. You build an entire city, a fortress really, right in the middle of a war zone in Afghanistan. And then, after years of work, someone tells you, okay, time to pack it all up, put it in the box, and take it home. Well, that was the monumental task facing the British military with Camp Bastion. Today, we're going to deconstruct that billion-dollar move, one of the most insane reverse logistics operations you've ever heard of. All right, let's get into it.
To really wrap your head around the scale here, let's just start with one thing: the runway. It cost £130 million. Just the airstrip. This wasn't some temporary camp they'd thrown up. This was a massive, sprawling city with a colossal investment behind it. And that runway alone tells you just how big the job of taking it all apart was going to be.
And this quote, man, it just hits the nail on the head. Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Quinn was one of the engineers who actually helped build Bastion in the first place, and then they brought him back to tear it all down. His words perfectly capture how massive and, frankly, how kind of absurd this whole mission was.
So before we get into how they pulled it off, you've got to understand what they were actually up against. At its height, Camp Bastion wasn't really a base. It was more like a bustling city, literally carved right out of the Helmand Desert, a fortress on sand.
I mean, just look at these stats. We're talking about a city the size of Reading in the UK, an airport busier than London Gatwick, one of the busiest in the world. It had 3 distinct districts and served over 34,000 meals a day. Every single piece of this place, the kitchens, the power plants, the roads, it all had to be accounted for, taken apart, or destroyed. Of course, every high-stakes operation needs a deadline, and this one had a code name that sounds like it's straight out of a movie: B-Day, Bastion Day. And this wasn't some soft target, you know? It was the final, non-negotiable date when the keys had to be handed over to the Afghan National Army, ready or not.
And how much time did they get for this colossal job? Just 120 days. 4 months. 4 months to erase a city that took 8 long years to build. For Colonel Quinn and his team, the clock was ticking, and it was ticking loud.
Now, obviously, you can't just pack up and leave military gear lying around for the enemy to find. This brings us to a fascinating and pretty brutal part of the process called demilitarization, and it's all governed by something they called the rules of war like scrap.
So here's how it worked. Anything that couldn't go home, from spare gun parts to whole vehicles, ended up in this scrapyard. And the process was incredibly thorough. Sights were smashed, triggers were removed. Anything that could possibly be used as a weapon was made completely useless. They even had this huge furnace they called the popcorn machine to destroy old ammo. It would safely detonate everything inside, leaving just little bits of brass behind.
And this quote from Sergeant Yuri Hill, the man running the scrapyard, pretty much says it all. You know, back in civilian life, he was a professional cricketer, but out here his job wasn't about building anything, it was about careful, systematic destruction. His whole mission, just smash it all up so it could never be used against them.
But here's the really tense part. This wasn't just a logistics problem. With every piece of equipment that left, with every soldier that flew home, the base got smaller. It became a more tempting target for the enemy. The fortress was literally shrinking, and as it shrank, it got more and more vulnerable.
And this threat wasn't just some abstract idea. It was very, very real. Back in 2012, insurgents dressed in US uniforms got inside the wire. A brutal firefight followed, and 2 US Marines lost their lives. The memory of that attack hung over this entire operation like a dark cloud.
And these numbers right here, they paint a pretty stark picture of that vulnerability. 300 troops were leaving every single week. By this point, 70% of them were gone, and 2/3 of the heavy weapons had been shipped out. So you get this terrifying paradox. The better they did at packing up, the more danger the remaining soldiers were in.
And for the soldiers still standing guard, the danger felt immediate. This is Rifleman Fox on his very first deployment, and he spells it out. The biggest fear wasn't a complex attack, it was a suicide bomber in a truck. As the base got emptier, that perimeter wire became the new front line.
So on top of all the logistical nightmares and the constant security threat, you had this really complex human element. The delicate and sometimes tense negotiations of handing this entire billion-dollar estate over to the Afghan army, an ally who had very different priorities.
And this chart lays out the problem perfectly. The British had strict rules about what they could leave. They were taking all the expensive, high-tech stuff like radar and surveillance gear home. But the Afghans? They were about to be left to continue the fight, and they were desperate for any equipment they could get their hands on. It was a real clash of needs.
And this little detail, it's actually pretty heartbreaking. Over the years, soldiers had painted these amazing murals on the concrete blast walls. Memorials, squadron logos, some of it was incredible art. But the official policy was that to avoid any possible cultural offense, every single piece of it had to be painted over, erased. It was this really sad symbol of the whole departure.
So, all of this builds to the final, incredibly tense moments. The end of 120 days of non-stop work, with the threat of attack hanging in the air right up until the last plane was off the ground.
And this comparison just shows you the immediate reality the Afghan forces were inheriting. The British had used high-tech cameras and surveillance, so they only needed a few soldiers in each watchtower. But all that gear went home with them. So the Afghans, they had to immediately double the number of men in each tower. From day one, they were facing more risk with less tech.
The last few moments were this strange mix of formal ceremony and maximum alert. A key was physically handed over to an Afghan general, marking the official transfer. But at the exact same time, Apache attack helicopters were circling overhead, ready to stop any last-ditch attack. And then, the last man out, Wing Commander Matt Radnall, walked up the ramp of the plane carrying the folded Union flag.
And with the wheels up on that last plane, that was it. It was done. After 13 long years, Britain's biggest, most expensive military campaign since the Second World War had officially come to an end.
Look, the deconstruction of Camp Bastion was an absolute masterpiece of logistics. It was a mission they pulled off against all odds. But it leaves us with this final, unavoidable question. They built a city of concrete and steel in the desert, and then they made it vanish. But after all that money, all that sacrifice, and that incredible effort to pack up and leave, what was truly built and what was really left behind?